Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Jams and Tea podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And every week, we cover some new releases in the world of music. And this week, we are going to be talking about the brand new records from new jazz wunderkind, Thundercat. We are talking about his new album, Distracted, as well as the third record from hyperpop artist Slayyyter, maximizing her joint slay in her new album, Worst Girl in America. We have the privilege of talking about two very funny albums this week. And we're going to start off talking about Thundercat. Thundercat is a very fascinating artist to talk about in the landscape of modern music. He is presently signed to Flying Lotus's record label Brainfeeder and has kind of been a consistent collaborator of those in the newer neo soul, jazz, psych rock, and even hip hop scene. He's played bass on multiple songs for people like Kendrick Lamar. He's worked with Kamasi Washington on some of his records. And generally speaking, he just has one of the most identifiable instrumental palettes in like all of modern music. Like he is one of the few people who I can breathlessly say I could pick out his bass playing in a lineup because it's so distinct. It's not because I'm good at recognizing bass players. I'm not that good. But Thundercat's interesting because he's had a couple of solo albums since the early 2010s, and none of them have really caught major momentum, but they've all been very well-liked critical records. And I've dabbled in some of Thundercat's old music just because I do think he is one of the best living bass players, and I love whenever he shows up on anything. But listening to some of his old albums, I didn't really get a whole lot out of them. I recognized them for being very virtuosic examples of playing, but it was the music itself that never really came together for me. And admittedly, I've only listened to his two previous records before this, and I'm not sure where they rank. And hell, I've gotten way more into things like funk and soul since I listened to that, so I might revisit those and find out that I like them a little bit more. But I didn't have any reason to be overwhelmingly excited for this album other than hearing that it was pretty good. So I checked it out. I took a look at it, and just on the merit alone of Thundercat's collaborators, which he does a great job at picking usually, we've got Tame Impala, Mac Miller, Lil Yachty, ASAP Rocky, Willow. I mean, come on. With that array, I had to see what the deal was. And much to my surprise, I think I finally get Thundercat's music, at least in the context of this record specifically, because what we have here is this utterly gorgeous combination of new funk, jazz, neo soul, and psychedelic rock. And it is combined with all of these different artists in multiple different ways, and is combined with a semi-conceptual angle applied to the writing here that ends up being very humorous, very referential, but still does manage to congeal together as an album. I feel like Thundercat is your speed gen. Like I'm not entirely certain where you are with this particular artist, but it feels like a gen type of thing. So what exactly did you get coming out of this record? Because it is such a grab bag of fascinating ideas, the vast majority of which I kind of completely love.
Ironically, the thing that I was thinking the most while listening to Thundercat is that it sounds like if Gorillaz made a breakup album with all the science fiction
Ooh.
references, the devotion to new funk, heavy reliance on features that kind of drive the directions of the songs forward. Because when Tame Impala is on this. It sounds like a Tame Impala song.
Better
When
Tame
Lil
Impala
Yachty
song
and
than we've gotten in like 10 years, too.
when Lil Yachty and Flying Lotus are on this, it sounds like a Flying Lotus song featuring Thundercat and Lil
Yes.
Yachty. And when ASAP Rocky is on this, it sounds like a track that fell off of Don't Be Dumb and
Yeah.
ended up on To Hear. And similarly with Willow. Thundercat, ironically, even on his own record, kind of bends to the inclinations of his guests. But with the album's thematic content, it synchronizes in a bizarre sort of way because
Yes.
this is Thundercat's breakup album and Thundercat's analysis of himself being kind of washed up and left to pick up the pieces
A bit of a
of the
loser. Yeah.
yeah, of kind of being a loser. There's a kind of 1-2 punch of the ultimate pathetic nerd lyricism on this record where he compares himself to Anakin Skywalker about to take the leap, insisting that he, in fact, has the high ground. And then you have the song Walking on the Moon, which is all about Thundercat making weird, blunt, not entirely coherent references to science fiction movies
Yep.
to try to describe the feeling of being kind of lost in disarray after this relationship has collapsed. But in a very postmodern pop song kind of way, the fact that the references that he's making don't really make any sense make the song better
Yes. I
because
agree.
you get more of the detached uncertainty that drives so much of this record forward. And you're hearing Thundercat lyrically come to an emotional conclusion where he's like, well, I have to start picking up the pieces and I have to start analyzing the patterns that I fall into in terms of what are the toxic relationship cycles of this thing that we call love and mental conditions have I had recently diagnosed that might be reconsidering how I've been thinking about some of my past actions.
Yeah.
Because when he just starts repeating ADD through the roof, I'm just like, oh man, I may not have ADD,
Been
but I've
there.
been there.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But it's
We
like
may
there are
not
days
have
where I'm looking at
ADD, but
myself in the
we're
mirror and I'm just like,
neurospicy in the same way.
yeah, there are days where if you're any kind of neurodivergent, there are days where you're going to look yourself in the mirror at least once an hour and just go, you're feeling real XYZ today, aren't you? And that's what ADD
Calm
through the
the
roof is
fuck
about.
down.
Huh?
I said, calm the fuck down.
And the way that Thundercat gets at all of this is, yeah, by making this very smooth, soulful, psychedelic new funk record, all about this kind of longing and acceptance in equal measure. Of like, yeah, the part of me that still wishes that this all could have worked out is still very much latching on to my psyche, but
Mm,
like the crash out is over and it's time to get back to work. That's kind of what this album feels like to me.
hmm.
Especially, I mean, given that we haven't gotten a Thundercat record in like 6 years,
Yeah.
it seems like it's been a long process to get this to us. And if anything, it's kind of indicative by the fact that we have this Mac Miller feature on here, which who knows how old this recording is, but God, it sounds great.
It really does. It sounds like a cut right from Swimming, honestly. Like it genuinely made me nostalgic for that brief window of time in which the posthumous Mac Miller album was released right before COVID happened, and everything felt kind of normal there for a little while.
Oh
Yeah, you
man.
remember that?
I
I
remember
remember
that
that.
vividly.
It's yeah, yeah. Those first 3 months, man, they sure feel like they happened yesterday and 9 years ago. Whoo! But yeah, no, I completely agree with you. The synergy of Thundercat and his guests on here is kind of the magic alchemy of this record because he does it flawlessly. And the thing I found even more impressive, honestly, is the fact that whenever we don't have a specific guest coming in, he still manages to hold his own. And I was a little worried about that because these feature choices, I mean, they're big and flashy. Like, I take a look at this and I'm like, what do you mean featuring the Lemon Twigs? I mean, I
I
loved the
love the
last Lemon
Lemon
Twigs album.
Twigs.
Yes, I love that last record and I adore psychedelic pop. So I was like, this has some opportunity to really be a solid like coalescence of influences. And it is. And I was worried that the other tracks would not hold their own as well, particularly because a lot of them are front loaded in the front half of this. But I actually think, in a weird way, this kind of mildly unserious album concept where the front half is kind of him portraying himself very much as the court jester and the fool, just like a guy who thinks a little bit too much of himself and maybe thinks that confidence is just all he needs. And it's very funny. It's very self-conscious. It's very excoriating. But the second half, when there's less influence from the features, he sounds lonelier. Once he comes to that realization, he sounds like he has to actually work through it himself. It's only really spurred on by the inclusion of things like Willow on Thunderwave, where you need an active counterpoint to sort of make the song's thesis make sense. But man, like some of these songs, simply like Candlelight might be my favorite thing on here, the opener. It is so exquisite. I mean, this sounds like a more soul inclined take on Miles Davis's early jazz fusion stuff. Like this sounds like somebody took the sound font of In a Silent Way and made this groovy, almost Pink Floydy psychedelic song. And I love that shit. And I mean, again, no more lies. Best Tame Impala song that we've had since before the Slow Rush. Like that shit is good as hell. A fantastic choice of collaboration. I love the Lil Yachty feature because it reminded me of that Lil Yachty album that we got a couple of years back where I was like, damn, this is surprisingly solid stuff for like what he's
Yeah,
going for.
I was also getting a throwback to Let's Start Here, hearing him over some Thundercat production, which was great.
And frankly, I really dug it. And the way that like the production on here is fantastic, but it's also fantastic in a very specific way in that the layering on here is so careful. Because I actually had to learn and look up this term. No More Lies is a song where there's these two rhythmic counterpoints in this song. It's Thundercat's bass and the drums. And basically, they are playing in two separate rhythms, which is known as a polyrhythm at the same time because they're going at the same tempo. However, within these two ideas interacting, there are occasional moments where the beats will synchronize with each other and then fall out of synchronicity and then back in again. This is called polyrhythmic syncopation, and it is insanely difficult to actually accomplish in a way that makes sense. But it's so textural. Like, I feel like my eardrums are being caressed by the rhythm sections on this album, and more specifically on this song. And, I do like the sort of many science fiction references that are on here. Like, I like that he doesn't just reference Star Wars in Anakin Learns His Fate. He actually makes, like, multiple more Star Wars references just because, he's one of those guys who you can just tell. He's like, I mean, he is like Flying Lotus in the sense that he just has this overwhelming love for things like anime and, like, adult animation and stuff and, science fiction movies. And he's got all this nerd shit that he'll reference. And it just makes it a lot more endearing. But the biggest thing that I think Thundercat has improved from where I've heard him in the past is both the performance and application of his vocals. He has this very light, very higher register voice that's not totally uncommon with like other neo soul singers. Like D'Angelo, for instance, has a very similar vocal tenor to a lot of his stuff on stuff like Voodoo. And I think that he's gotten better at using it just because Thundercat does not have the most traditionally like nice sounding voice. Like he's got one of those vocal presences where it really is just all in how you use it. And on here, I feel like it's the best I've ever heard it. It's not exactly like leaping out and really like grabbing me, but it suits these songs' functions really well. Everything in this album feels like it's tightly packed together, very neatly arranged, very considered, but not sterile. It doesn't feel as though it's too sort of manicured. It has a little bit of spontaneity in it that feels kind of cool, particularly in the looser second half.
Yeah, I think when we get to the second half in this album, like you said, it kind of cutting loose is a good way to describe it because when we're focusing more on Thundercat's individual perspective on all of this, the album becomes a lot more reserved in its pacing and it's able to linger on some ideas, thematic ideas, for a lot longer than some of the guest verses and guest features allow. And it leads to this being a really solid breakup, recovery, persistence narrative that I thought was really interesting to listen to.
Yeah, it's comforting, but it's also very immersive. It's a different kind of breakup album than people are probably used to, but
It's
it's
a it's
for
a
that
breakup
very
album about
reason that it works.
laughing. It's a breakup album about laughing at yourself, which is a
And
rare thing.
I think that's incredibly healthy. Like the only standout weakness I really identify in this album is that I love the functionality of the second half, but the songs themselves do not have the body and strength that maybe the first half does. It's not bad, it doesn't ever fall off, but it's a little bit, that it's more empty, it's more spacey, and it is good. It does hold its own. But I can't lie, like the songs that I'm going to come back to, they are mostly that first half. But it's a really good journey. I can't necessarily say that any point on it feels like a chore. Like, if anything, just listen to this for the production because it really is remarkable. This is one of the best sounding albums of the year. And if you like that rich kind of textural neo soul, then you're gonna dig the hell out of this. Like if this would pair very, very well with the Jill Scott album that we reviewed last week. Like do a back-to-back listen of these two, and I think that you'll get some really great, just sort of upbeat and spry, but still very thoughtful music in your media diet.
Absolutely. So, big love to the Thundercat album, Distracted.
Big love. And now we're going to talk about the latest internet music sensation, the climbing them, rate your music charts, and I'm seeing everybody who like every lesbian mutual on Letterboxd I have is logging the music videos for this on there, and I've just been like, you know, I really need to check this Slayyyter person out because I've heard of them before, but I have no frame of reference. I just know that's the Slayyyter. That's all I've really got. And so I saw that this was doing super well. People were really digging it, and I was like, it seems to be the first album from this artist that has really broken through in this specific way. Not to say she didn't have a following beforehand, but this really feels like the moment for her. And good on her. Worst Girl in America is a fascinating album that we can kind of add to the modern post hyperpop canon, sort of. It's this insanely confident collision of electropop and electroclash and hyperpop that makes this buzzing, very, very erratic, very aggressive sounding pop record that has these insanely loud guitars, these almost Flatlander style death grip synths on some of the songs on here. And we get an album that the best way I can put this album's vibe is that this is an album that makes me want to get white girl wasted. And I mean that insanely affectionately, especially because, wow, the first five songs on this, I'll say it right out the gate. If this album was an EP of its best songs, I don't think I would ever stop listening to it. That's not to say it's like inconsistent or anything, but I am saying that the highlights on here, I get it. I really get it with this artist.
Me too. I'm fully in the can for Slayyyter after listening to this because she has saying this is going to sound so blunt because
Do
it
it.
seems so obvious to me. But this is the Kesha that we needed all along in the
Thank
space.
you.
I
Yes.
Everything about this is all the glitz and the glam and the what's the word I'm looking for? The
I want
vulgarity of
sex,
like
money, bitches,
early
and the stickiest weed. That is literally, I'm not
yeah.
even kidding, one of my favorite song hits or song hooks of the entire year. The way she delivers that melody, the I want sex, money, bitches, and the stickiest weed. It's so good, man. It's so good.
amazing hooks all over this thing. A song on this. So the song Yes God has a hook that sounds exactly like the song from the movie Hack-A-Lantern. Which I've never been able to
What a
forget because
pull,
it has that
Jen!
sick fucking guitar line that I've never been able to get out of my head. And it sounds like that.
You're right. Oh, the three people that understand that reference are gonna pop off so fucking hard. You're so right. Oh, you're so right. That's fantastic. It's the Kesha comparison is so good and so on point because it's so distinct. It's just being done with a very different sound. And there's even moments on here where it feels like its embrace of more contemporary sounds really does feel like it elevates it in that regard, just because Kesha's older stuff is really only held back by the fact that it sounds like very 2010s pop music. Like that's the thing is that I'm it's not a unpopular thing. Like I'm not, Jesus of Nazareth on the cross up here saying that I like fucking Kesha, but like I do actually really unironically like Kesha. It's just that her old music doesn't like sound good to my ears because that was the part that she wasn't really in control of, but I like her newer stuff. But the specific like aiming for the Kesha image, the Kesha iconography, is
Yeah.
clearly the point of Worst Girl in America, where this person is embracing all of the trashy, hedonistic, just like lowest common denominator. Like, this album has the same mentality on like consumerism and shit as like thrift shop. It's just, smarter and a little bit less obvious about it. But the character portrait here is deceptively quite strong and in fact reminded me very, very much of the Underscores album that we talked about a few weeks ago. Because you do see, like, the first half of this album is about projecting this untouchable confidence. This image of this bitch who cannot be fucked with. This person who is like, yeah, I'm fucking like, I'm here, I'm wasted, I'm here to suck dick, get bitches, and get money, and no one will stop me. Fuck you, fuck everything. And then little tiny bits, tiny cracks in the facade keep becoming more and more apparent. And by the time we get to Gas Station, a literal song about being abandoned by your boyfriend at a gas station, which is like such a specifically trashy Kentucky thing that I was kind of like, is it weird that I kind of relate to this song?
No, I see that image perfectly in my mind, and I know that like my picture of what this song looks like and yours are 98% the
Yeah,
same.
yeah, a little bit. And like you see continually that there are these moments, like it gets more and more obvious. Like on songs like Unknown Lovers, she's very much painting the portrait of someone who is clearly disinterested in her, but she is kind of about facing it and just like she's making a song about how much she loves someone, but still unafraid to show how in the writing this person doesn't care. Like she's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we're partying, we're doing this thing," and also this person's not texting me back. Also, this person does not give a fuck what I have to say, what I think, what I do, all of these things. And it just gets more and more and you see her start to desperately kind of assemble this image and this iconography that she so flawlessly projects on the first half, but like piecemeal and like weaker on the second half in songs like I'm Actually Kind of Famous and What Is It Like to Be Liked. Like I'm Actually Kind of Famous is just this like, oh, I'm internet famous, look at me, I'm so fucking cool, I'm the best ever, but like also you're an internet micro celebrity. What the fuck are you talking about, bro? Like
It
this
comes
is not.
across as horrendously pathetic despite how
Yes.
hard she's trying to flex, which is intentional.
Yes, very
And it
much so.
sounds great. It's a very funny song.
So, Jen, I have a question. How do you skew this album's existence when we live in a post-Brat world? Because that was really all I could think about when listening to this.
Ooh, that's a thornier question maybe you thought it was going to be. Thinking about this in conversation with Brat is incredibly strange.
Right? I thought so too.
Because Brat is an album that I think reflected Somebody said this about Charlie XCX, I don't know who, but Charlie XCX is like the only person that could actually decide how famous she would ever be at any given moment because it seemed like the more effort that she put into marketing herself, immediately the more famous she got,
Hmm.
and immediately the more attention that she got on her from the mainstream. And Brat is very much an album about feeling enmeshed in the mainstream without belonging there. That shines through in the way that she discusses some relationships with some of the biggest and brightest and streamiest of her colleagues, and also in
Right.
how she honestly wears the kind of weirdo costume throughout that record of just being like, yeah, I don't really do all this. Like, I don't fit in 100% into the pop star image. But Slayyyter, I think, is very different because if we take the idea of the brat as a titular concept, okay, let's square that with the worst girl in America and try to
Which
ask
I
what's
feel like
happening there.
aren't like uncomparable. Like I feel like there's a real thesis you can develop by comparing the images that both of these albums are very distinctly trying to project because they sound kind of similar, they're taking from similar things, and they try to accomplish similar goals, but they have subtle differences that I do think make like them very very different records because that's the album that I see keep getting compared to this one, and it doesn't seem like it's being unfavorably compared. It just seems like that's what people are going for. And I get why.
Yeah, I mean to stretch my bona fides. This is the first of our like big dance records that we've talked about this year that's really gotten that brush with mainstream attention.
Hmm.
Because like I mean, Nina Girachi just played at Coachella and did a great job, but I don't see like people on my Instagram stories talking about Nina Girachi. I see them talking about Slayyyter though. So if I'm thinking about it as a product of a different sphere of influence, Worst Girl in America embraces the underground in a similar way that Brat kind of does on its own comparable scale. Like Charlie XCX was not underground when Brat came out, and I would still relatively call Slayyyter underground, especially in comparison.
Oh yeah.
But what Slayyyter is getting at is more rootsy influences in rock and pop than Brat had, which gives it this kind of more Southern
Yeah.
Americana white trash texture that again would drive something like early Kesha music or like oh what was her name, that country singer that they were trying to fashion as Kesha lookalike with that you're a dick, you're a dick, you're ridiculous song.
Oh God, I don't remember the name, but I know who you're talking about because I just remember being like, "Damn, man, that's crazy. You just copied the same playbook. You didn't change a damn thing, but the songs aren't good."
But
But I
Slayyyter being more rooted in like country and rock music, being more rooted in the lyricism of country music, especially on songs like Gas Station, but also getting full into dubstep influences on songs like Crank. There's a
Oh
lot
my
more
God.
thematic back and forth and piecemeal influence on this. Whereas Brat all kind of felt like this singularly distilled thing that could kind of fluctuate from song to song. On here, there's definitely more like, oh yeah, this is the this song, this is the that other thing moment. The influences are more disparate, and so the album itself is more disparate,
Yeah.
but it also has a more definite shift in the first half to the second half. Whereas Brat always has those little quiet moments just kind of in between that kind of come and go
Hmm.
that show off that more jaded weakness that Charlie has. For me, it's one of the weakest moments on the album, but compare the arrival of I Might Say Something Stupid and the way that the album just kind of swings back into its original direction immediately afterwards.
Yeah.
With where on this, Gas Station is the first sign of a kind of decay that this album is going to continue facing and continue expressing.
Yes.
And so it feels more cohesive as an album about peeling back the layers.
I think that that is a perfectly astute observation. In fact, I kind of think just because we didn't talk about Brat when it came out because it was kind of during the hiatus we were on, but when comparing these two records, because like I've kind of been on record being like, I think Brat's fine. It's just not really for me. I was always kind of hot and cold with Charlie, but specifically that one seemed to not really work for me. And I kind of came to an interesting conclusion while listening to this and very much enjoying it this week. That being that Brat is one of the only albums like this where I would argue that the imposed nuance of its writing makes me enjoy it less. And the more kind of blunt, forward facing writing on Worst Girl in America makes me connect with it more because I think about what you said about Brat a long time ago as being my kind of byline for it, that being that Brat is an album that breaks kayfabe one too many times, and Worst Girl in America no sells. Like it's never you never feel like the facade is melting, but it's an earnestness that's melting. Like you
It's an
see,
album about the facade melting.
yes, and Brat is an album where the facade doesn't even exist. It's like there is no projected image, but in that you kind of feel like it becomes a Matryoshka doll of itself, and you're like, where does what Charlie wants me to see begin, and where is what I'm actually seeing end? I don't it became very weird to try and like get around, but this I feel like it's designed way more like a bullet. And with albums like this, I mean, look, maybe I'm just fucking dumb. I'm not discounting this possibility, but this particular brand of head empty club music, it just hits a little bit harder. Like you fucking Crank is a song that like Crank is like the first 30 minutes of Honora if it was a song, and it slams. Like
Oh,
this,
that's such a good
right? It's
call.
so
Oh my
like
God.
bright and exaggerated, and like the sex in it is so outlandish, and you're just like, whoa. Like it is hard not to get swept up in this near parodically exaggerated reality that we are being presented. And I love how she manages to really define her frayed edges on stuff like Beat Up Chanel's, which again has an amazing hook, but also just the embrace of the trashiness here feels so real. Like I know this girl. I went to school with this girl, and I kind of found her really obnoxious. But when you distill her into an album with this good production, then I can get on board. Like my favorite parts on this album are when the guitars come in because they sound serrated. They sound like
Yeah.
fucking sheet metal, and it's awesome. Like you don't hear that instrumental idea in stuff like this. In fact, the Underscores album we talked about did have this idea, but it utilized it in way more of a straight-laced kind of way, just sort of incorporating it to the structure. The guitars on here are nothing but texture. They're so just jagged and odd sounding. It's like this is a real feat of taking normal sounding digital instruments and making them sound almost as unrecognizable as you possibly can. And, you know, like maybe I just haven't hit critical mass on this idea yet, but it's a sound that has so much potential because there's only one real, like, right way to make something sound what people perceive as traditionally good. When you fuck something up, you can fuck it up in a million different ways. So we're kind of discovering that, like, I feel like the last 10 years of pop music is learning about how to break pop music while still not changing what it fundamentally is and does. And this kind of continues in that trend. It is conceptual, it is like different, it is left field, but it is ultimately another entry in what we're seeing is just like pop music can be abrasive, but still is pop music. Pop music can be like, you know, it can break from the pack, but you can still have it be available for mass consumption. And you don't have to compromise it. That's the beauty of it, is that you don't ever have to be like, oh, well, you know, what about my mass appeal? What about this? What about that? That doesn't really matter anymore. If you've got the hooks, if you've got the tunes, that's that people really only care about that. And that's kind of good. I honestly, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing that people gravitate. It seems like really the most important thing these days is song structure
Yeah.
and lyrical structure. And I think pour one out, but I think TikTok did that.
Oh no, you're on. You're on one. Yeah, you're
TikTok
right.
made it to where you had to sound like you were saying something interesting.
And you had to condense your song structures. Everything had to be like designed so that it was vacuum sealed into a shorter, more serotonin inducing instant gratification type of thing. And it has such diminishing returns. Like you go and listen to peak TikTok music from the last 5 years, and it is already aged a decade. You're like,
I was
okay,
gonna say I couldn't even tell you what TikTok music is anymore, but
thank God.
I mean there are good artists that have come out of the TikTok hit. Like Remy Wolf had a
Yeah.
TikTok hit in her early days. And so obviously that framework can empower writers who are good at doing those kinds of songs and
But it can also
songwriting.
limit them.
Yeah, but it can also limit them. And I guess my larger point about Slayyyter is that these songs feel much more distinct from each other in a
Yeah.
way where I can pick apart more of the influences that go into each one and identify unique emotional and creative spaces on this.
Hmm.
Whereas compared to, I'll just make it a whole thematic through line. Whereas to compare it to Brat, all of it feels like the product of a single train of thought.
Yeah.
And that has its benefits and its drawbacks. But
Hmm.
this album is a bit more loose and a bit more of a hopscotch in its different tonal and emotional beats than
Yeah.
Brat is in its strutting through its facade.
It's a hyperpop album that only starts sounding like Sophie in its final third with stuff like Saint Loser, which is insanely rare. And look, I am an enormous Sophie fan. I own every single available piece of music that woman ever made. I am kind of hoping that her influence does not limit people's creativity in trying to echo her specifically, because like it's cool that we're tributing her, like really, like that's a good thing. I like that. But also like it can come to a point where it's like she was an artist about expansion. She was an artist about breaking norms and trying to push limits, and we're risking kind of betraying the spirit a little bit. But when I hear an album like this and when I see it being so successful, I'm like, oh, we're fine. Like I don't got to worry about that shit. Like we're still out here doing new, interesting ideas, even if, to the untrained ear, this isn't going to sound all that different to the most abrasive Charlie XCX stuff or, underscores or whatever. But that's just kind of a sign that it belongs in the scene that it does. I kind of think that there does come a point where you have to make a delineation between, is this thing either uninspired or not innovating enough, or does it just belong to a sound that inherently makes it similar to other things? And I kind of think that this album is a little bit of both, which is normal.
Yeah, I mean, most albums are like that.
Yeah, and
Not everything is Brat, and
no. And
Brat
it
isn't even Brat at the end of the day, and that's kind of what Brat is about.
I mean, I really couldn't have put that better myself. And this album, like, I enjoy it immensely. It's a very fun album. It does have the same problem as the other album that we're talking about this week, though, in that I do think that the second, more introspective half, while artistically successful and enjoyable, does not compare to its riskier, bigger swings that it takes on that first half. And some of that is just how it goes, but I do think that, we don't have to necessarily make our music like a little bit less compelling when we strip things back. There is a way to do it right, and it is mostly done right. But there are more spare moments on here and less significant moments that don't exactly do it for me. I will say, though, the closer on here, Brittany Murphy, from a writing perspective,
Wow.
fuck, what an accomplishment this song is. Like, I was quite like, even seeing the title, you're like, Brittany Murphy, huh? Uh, are we going to be feeling some things? In a little bit, yeah, honestly. Like the
Yeah, I didn't know anything
comparison,
about this story, so I had to learn a lot about. I was looking it up and like reading
sad.
about Brittany Murphy and wow. And I can
Yeah,
see how that story is kind of influencing Slater's feelings of seeing the car crash about to happen, but not quite knowing where exactly the impact is going to come from.
Yeah, you're like, the car is crashing and I have to crash it into the best possible place this car can crash. And like, what is that? What does that mean? I don't know at this point. And it's like, it's a moment of finality that also kind of lets you think that, like, this image, this construction of the worst girl in America, there is more depth here, and obviously that's kind of the point of the record. It's what it's shooting for. But I feel like there is an honesty at the end of the day that anchors this into feeling something where you're just like, I see it. I see the damaged person at the source of this music that Slayyyter is clearly trying to project. And I do find it compelling, even though it's not necessarily like, oh, wow, what do you mean? A pop star is unhappy? Oh, no one's ever done this before. Like, yeah, we get it. But it's not about the what, it's always about the how. And Worst Girl in America, very impressive, very fun how.
Yes.
What the fuck did I just say?
You made sense. You're only
Sure.
making sense because you're doing that thing where you undercut yourself. And on that note, thumbs up for Slater.
I couldn't say anything because then I would be undercutting myself, and I was like, damn it. I've become too self-aware. The kayfabe is real. Fuck. I am Brat. Thumbs up. And if you all enjoyed this episode, please tell us what you think of these albums and what you think of whatever it is that you are listening to this week, because we will be back later next week covering some new records. And as always, folks, rock over London, rock on Chicago, MTV. I want my MTV. I think that one needed to go back to the drawing board, guys. I think that one maybe needed some.
It
I think you need to
worked.
get Don
It
Draper on that
worked,
one.
didn't it?
What now?
It worked, didn't it?
Fuck it. You know, for a period of time, it sure as fuck did until it stopped.